Good morning, Honorable Minister Sir. Namaste to all attendees on Sunday morning for this virtual meet. I, Anand Ambekar, your host, on behalf of Forum for Integrated National Security FINS and technology partner Maritime Research Center, welcome you all at 2nd Manohar Parrikar Memorial Lecture. By the way, today is the 65th birthday anniversary of Sri Manohar Parrikar. FINS is a think tank of eminence and one of its kind with rich talent pool of people from different fields including defense veterans, advocates, research scholars, academicians and the list go on. Among many activities which FINS pursues include peer-reviewed online journal, FINS Journal of Diplomacy and Strategy, short-term certificate program on strategic studies, fostering young researchers and mentoring them for research projects in the areas of maritime security, IOR, personal data protection, counter strategy to CPEC, to name few. FINS has organized two international conferences in the series of Sagar, Security and Growth for All in the Region, our respected Prime Minister's vision. FINS is also setting up Institute of Strategic Studies at Goa. People who said India does not have strategic thinking culture were forced to change their perception, which was made possible by a few architects in modern India, and Sri Manohar Parrikar being one of the pillars. In his brief innings of 2.5 years as Defense Minister, he gave strategic directions to the defense policies and giving confidence not only to the defense personnel but even to a common man that they are living in a safe place and their lives and property is in safe hands. For Sri Manohar Parrikar, it was nation first and the rest all was a part of his life. In the pursuit of furthering the ideology and guidance of Sri Manohar Parrikar and to reach out to the strategic thinking community, FINS has initiated this yearly event, Sri Manohar Parrikar Memorial Lecture, to create sensitivity about national security policy, foreign policy, which will help the country to hold his baton in high esteem and keep his flame of thoughts guiding through thick and thin for all of us, the Indians. The first Manohar Parrikar Memorial Lecture was organized on 14th December 2019. The topic was India's Security Perspective 2030, and the speaker was none other than General B.P. Rawat and then COS and now CDS. India post-independence in last 6-7 years, probably for the first time, taking most decisive steps in her foreign policy and defense policy, be it surgical strikes, standing firm and tall during Doklam logjam, holding our ground during Ladakh infiltration by China, to name a few again. For last 9 months, we all have witnessed the effects of pandemic, negative growth rate of GDP, disruption of global supply chain, over 1.5 million deaths, and the miseries are on. Meanwhile, Japan has announced a package of 2.1 billion to relocate companies from China. Taiwanese companies like Foxconn, Wistron, locating their manufacturing plants in say, Sri Perambuddur and Bengaluru. Prime Minister's appeal for Atmanirbhar Bharat and vocal for local met with huge response. India not joining regional comprehensive economic partnership is seen as significant step by India. We now look at IOR as area of influence. Act East policies are in dividends and states near South China Sea are having strong partnership with India, including importing of weapons. Even after change in guard at US, India is still looked upon as important partner by US. Surely, it takes a lot of diplomatic efforts, which is also getting reflected in our foreign policy. Pandemic period has witnessed unprecedented geopolitical activities, including Armenia-Azerbaijan war, peace accord sorry, Australia parting ways with China, to name a few. And these events will have long-lasting impact on world at large and India in specific. Yes, India is resurgent and the person at the helm, External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar, is with us today to enlighten about contours of India's foreign policy, diplomacy, security and trade, in which focus will be on the relationship between defense and diplomacy to underline the importance of greater integration in policy making. As we proceed further, to prepare the mindset of this august audience, we have the privilege of hearing a person who is a veteran of 3 wars India fought during the tenure, recipient of prestigious PVSM, AVSM, VSM, 2 PhDs under his belt, and third one near completion. He was a chairman of Shekatkar Committee, which was Committee of Experts on Defense Procurement Policy and Reforms. Person who is currently Chancellor of Sikkim Central University, President of Forum for Integrated National Security FINS. May I now request General Dr. Shekatkar to present his thoughts. Over to you, sir.
Good morning, Honorable Minister, and the galaxy of people present today for this memorial lecture. We are honored to have you, sir, with us. We couldn't have got a better person to speak on the theme of the military diplomacy and the diplomacy under which we work. Today is 13th of December. We also have to remember today was the day when our parliament was attacked by terrorists. I was in service at that time, I was Lieutenant General. And we know what happened then. So therefore, sir, Forum for Integrated National Security also observes 13th of December as a National Security Day for India. We have to remember the young generation probably may not even know. And therefore, today is a day of great importance to us. Sir, you may recall George Fernandez and Shri Parrikar had mentioned about the threats emerging to India from different quarters. Integrated national security is dealing with the integrated national security of India and the comprehensive security. Security and defense mean different things to different people, depending on which part of the country they are, in what profession they are, what are the academic background, and so on and so forth. Feel that any threat to economic security, food security, water security, apart from border security, internal security, can be a threat to a nation. And that is the thrust we have been adopting in this forum. And through this forum, we are trying our best to make the people aware. Today, unfortunately, particularly in India, allow me to speak the truth. People think security and defense is the job of the government. We have nothing to do. I think in 21st century, it is high time we change our mindset. We have to follow some of the nations across the world where every citizen thinks he is a soldier. He may not be a soldier in uniform, but his concern to the nation and nation well-being has to be remembered by them. Sir, I had the honor, my guru, Dr. K. Subramaniam. I used to work with him under his guidance in the Institute of Defense Strategic Analysis, which has been named at Manohar Parrikar. So whatever one learned, we are trying to put across to them. They both had said that the biggest challenge to India's security and defense will come from East Asia. I do not want to name any nation. You have been mentioning about it. We know what has happened in the month of April, May, and how we have stood to give the befitting response what the aggressor deserves. Mr. Parrikar was of the view that no nation can keep aloof itself from religion and politics. What we should be concerned with is the electoral politics. And that is why in Finns we also observe the same thing. The changing perception in 21st century. We just see in last 4 or 5 years, the concept of 2+2 dialogue has emerged. Today, the conventional diplomacy and the military diplomacy are running parallel to each other. They are like a railway line. We can't move on one line at all. In the Western world, without naming any countries, and also in East Asia, some nation, they resort to military diplomacy first, use of force. And when the opponents start behaving in a manner in which they deserve to be taught a lesson, they say, let's now get on to the conventional diplomacy. So therefore, in this time, both the diplomacy, the military power, the military diplomacy, which has to take the direction and guidance from the diplomatic core of our country, that is the conventional diplomacy. I'm 100% sure, sir, you will be dealing with these issues during your deliberation. Once again, I thank you all for being with us and the Honorable Foreign Minister of India. We are privileged to have you, sir. Welcome, and we look forward as a think tank, Forum for Integrated National Security, if it can be of any use. We have with us young Dr. Arnab Das, who is an expert underwater domain security. He's a PhD, young fellow. And this aspect has not taken serious manner in India, who has a large course. So we'll be available to you, sir, breathing out. And may I now request our coordinator to kindly take it on.
Thank you, General Dr. Shekatkar. As usual, with a stroke of brush, you have painted a canvas depicting correlation between diplomacy, defense policy, integrated security, to name few facets of the whole cliched subject. Thank you so much, sir. I am aware that all of us are eagerly waiting to hear our External Affairs Minister, the Speaker of the day. However, I will fail in my duty if I don't use this opportunity to introduce our Minister, sir, and to do the honors, I request person who served in Indian Army for nearly 4 decades, decorated with PVSM, AVSM, retired in 2018, and since then appointed as a military advisor to the National Security Council Secretariat, NSCS. May I now request General Khandare to kindly introduce our Speaker of the Day. Over to you, sir.
Jai Hind to all of you, and very good morning to Honorable Minister. Firstly, it's a privilege and honor to be introducing an illustrious person as the Honorable Minister. Actually, I just want to tell you very briefly as I start introducing, on the website of the Ministry of External Affairs, the profile of the minister is only for 143 words. I think that gives an indication how much I should be speaking. And as compared to the other foreign ministers, small countries where the foreign minister's profile has been given for nearly 400 words. But the Honorable Minister believes in a certain amount of mysticism where the adversaries must keep guessing what he is, what he thinks, and how he would take decisions. The profile of the Honorable Minister has been given very clearly on the website of the Ministry of External Affairs as well as the website of FINS. I just want to highlight a few things. Firstly, he is the first Foreign Secretary to have been elevated to the cabinet rank of the Foreign Minister. A singular achievement and confidence which the Honorable Prime Minister has in him. Like a career diplomat, he has had an illustrious career where he's been an ambassador for the longest period in China. And during this period, he was able to handle a lot of sensitive things, including one issue where China refused to give visa to our Northern Army commander. Then there was a problem which came up in Depsang, and he took a stand, and that made China look at alternatives, where he said the planned visit of the Premier Li Keqiang would not go through. These certain incidents show us his character and caliber. There have been many things which he was able to accomplish when he moved to the United States as our ambassador. We are all aware of the prevailing environment in United States apex leadership and how he turned it around, and he was the ambassador who conducted the maiden visit of our Prime Minister, and you all saw how the visit went through. And thereafter he became the Foreign Secretary, and his entire tenure as Foreign Secretary till he retired in January 2018 was full of such incidents which possibly the earlier Foreign Secretaries may not even have looked at. While he has shown what kind of strategy the country would have towards our foreign relations, but I would fail in my duty if I do not highlight a few of these speed breakers which kept coming in his way, starting from the Pathankot airbase attack, then the Uri, and followed by a befitting reply of surgical strikes. It wouldn't have gone through had the Honorable Minister, then the Foreign Secretary, not taken a stand. And that is the period when I worked very closely with him, and I was able to see the qualities which he has and the qualities which he depicted. Even in the case of Doklam, I think India was the first and the only country till then to have taken a stand, and a forceful stand, against China. And after a 73 days deadlock, we were back on track. I just wanted to highlight these few issues, and then both the Honorable Minister and I retired in the same month. And then in May 19, he was sworn in as the Foreign Minister, and we've been seeing the journey that India has been taking, and it's for the world to see the way our country has taken a stand against our northern neighbors, as also what we mean on our Western front. I am too small a person to be talking more about the Honorable Minister, but I would like to close by saying that Shri Manohar Parrikar and the Honorable Minister, Dr. Jaishankar, worked together a lot. There were many parleys which used to take place. And the other day when I went to invite the Honorable Minister for this event, and we had a chat, and he narrated to me a few incidents which he had, interesting interactions he had with Shri Manohar Parrikar. I would not like to reveal anything. He can possibly convey that. I do not want to stand between the audience and the Honorable Minister. Over to you for the proceedings, please.
We'll
Over to
request
you,
Honorable.
sir. Over to you, sir. External Affairs Minister, sir, over to you.
General Shekatkar, General Khandare, dear friends, we are all here virtually today to remember Manohar Parrikar ji, who would have turned 65 years old. It is natural for us to express our feelings and recall our associations. I myself had the opportunity of working with him as Foreign Secretary. Quite apart from our many official interactions, my recollection is of a very warm and informal person with no airs about him. He could be very caring. It was very easy to build a rapport with him. So I can well imagine that there are many plugged into this event, who would share my sentiments about him. But on an occasion like this, it would also be right to step back a bit and assess what he meant in terms of policy making and governance, and how much of that ended up as his legacy. So I'm truly grateful to General Shekatkar and the Forum for Integrated National Security for bringing us all together in that endeavor. It is a real honor to deliver the second Manohar Parrikar Memorial Lecture. And the theme I have selected for my remarks is of the relationship between defense and diplomacy, to underline the importance of greater integration in policymaking. In many ways, those are the very issues which were at the core of my interaction with Manohar Parrikar ji. Now, few would disagree with the observation that when Manohar Parrikar came to Delhi as Minister of Defense, it was really like a breath of fresh air, that too from Goa. This was much needed because it is typical for any system to see habits set in and beliefs become entrenched. Parrikar ji came in with his different persona, took charge, and then brought to bear his enormous energy on all matters of national security. And he did that, in his own inimitable style, engaging intensively with his colleagues and with his co-workers, questioning assumptions, offering his own views very transparently, and inviting those of others, taking part in the argumentation that followed. It certainly was quite different from the ethos prevailing before that. Even though his tenure was less than 3 years, he established a well-deserved reputation for being practical and for being outcome-oriented. He showed strategic clarity in assessing the world and did what he should on important matters of national interest. Today, it's his outlook that I would like to focus on to emphasize to you the need to be non-dogmatic and self-critical when it comes to policy making. Even otherwise, these are valuable attributes, but especially so in a world that is rapidly changing. Now, the global order is continuously evolving, and tracking that process is intrinsic to policy making. What may be different now is that the magnitude, complexity, and the pace of change. Because it has so many more dimensions and variables, the prospect of not fully comprehending all its implications is all the more real. These are not just matters of policies and their implementation. We have actually seen sharp shifts in the basic stance and behavior of nations and their interplay with each other. Some of this has unfolded more visibly in the last year, but its contours were evident even before. The salience of China and the repositioning of the United States are perhaps the two sharpest examples. But there are many others of great consequence, whether we speak of Brexit and intra-EU politics, the Abraham Accords and the dynamics of the Gulf, the challenges faced by Africa, the ideological debates which we see in Latin America, or the evolution of the Indo-Pacific. Each, in their own way, are a reflection of this larger rebalancing and the emergence of multipolarity. Now, the resulting redistribution of power is, however, not a zero-sum game among national competitors. There are new assertions in areas like connectivity and finance, just as there are growing deficits in global goods and multilateral regimes. Such a profound transformation in the global landscape obviously cannot leave India unaffected. What are our key national security challenges? Where and how do they arise? Who are actual or potential partners? What can be optimal solutions? These are all questions to which the answers currently are very different from what they may have been in earlier decades. Our policy planning, indeed our strategic thinking, must obviously adjust to these new realities. Change, however, is not just external. If we are the fifth largest economy in the world, and third actually by PPP terms, our relationship with the world cannot be the same as when our ranking was much lower. Similarly, if our contribution to global talent and skills demand is so much larger, then so too will be our relevance in the calculation of others. A growing domestic demand will give our markets a salience in the business planning of the world that it did not have earlier. The same holds true for our growing capabilities, whether in defense, economy, or technology. On the big global issues of our times, whether we speak of climate change or trade flows or health concerns or data security, India's positioning has more influence on the eventual outcome. Our stakes in the world have certainly become higher, and correspondingly, so too have the expectations of us. Simply put, India matters more, and our worldview must process that in all its aspects. And just as important, our work style and mindset must adjust to raise the level of our game. The national security challenges faced by this rising India are also obviously going to be very different. At one level, some of the more perennial problems associated with our national consolidation and development will continue. In particular, a long-standing political rivalry is today expressed as sustained cross-border terrorism by a neighbor. Today, as General Shekatkar reminded us, is the anniversary of the attack on our parliament. In some other cases, activities of insurgent groups need to be continuously monitored and neutralized. But the world is a competitive place, and India's rise will evoke its own reactions and responses. There will be attempts to dilute our influence and limit our interests. Some of this contestation can be directly in the security domain. Others could be reflected in economics, connectivity, even in societal contexts. Indeed, as the metrics of measuring power themselves undergo change, so too will their application when it comes to the games that nations play. We are an increasingly interdependent world with many of the accompanying constraints. The era of unconstrained military conflicts may be behind us, but the reality of limited wars and coercive diplomacy is still very much a fact of life. Visualizing and responding to a new range of national security complexities require the willingness to continuously review policy and audit performance. And that is the area where Manohar Parrikar ji certainly serves as an inspiration. Since 2014, we have witnessed a number of conceptual changes in Indian foreign policy. Much of that was influenced by the growing understanding of the different world that we had begun to face. In terms of neighborhood first, the new approach envisaged a generous and non-reciprocal engagement of neighbors that was centered around connectivity, contacts, and cooperation. The enhanced importance of India to the daily life of its neighborhood will clearly build stronger regionalism. But it was also one that is clearly predicated on mutual sensitivity and mutual respect for each other's interests. This was followed by the Sagar Doctrine, which took an integrated view of the maritime space in India's proximity and beyond. Here too, a template of cooperation was created that gave long-awaited attention to strengthening maritime capabilities, infrastructure, activities, and cooperation. To India's west, there was a conscious initiative to appreciate and engage the Gulf in its full strategic manifestation. This took the relationship beyond the more limited understanding of the region's energy and diaspora elements to India. Now, correspondingly, on the East, the rollout of the Act East policy added the security and connectivity dimensions more prominently to an interaction that was already central to India's globalization. The overarching view, of course, was of a steadily growing multipolarity that mandated a stronger Indian engagement with the major power centers. It not only took greater finessing to do that successfully, but also a nuanced understanding to ensure that we got the best value from each of these ties. All this required a more holistic and integrated view of the evolving global architecture, one that brought elements of politics, defense, internal security, economics, commerce, technology, and connectivity together. On his part, Manohar Parikarji made a particular contribution to promoting synergies between defense and foreign policies, institutionally reflected in his time in much closer MEA-MOD cooperation. This yielded results not only in terms of the larger strategic framework, but also in responding to the challenges of the day. If we were successful in evacuating 5,600 persons of 41 countries during the Yemen conflict, this was due in no small measure to the contributions made by the Indian Navy and the Air Force. The civil-military partnership was even more strongly in evidence when we responded so promptly to the catastrophic Nepal earthquake in 2015. Indeed, the firm establishment of India's role as a first responder in HADR situations across the Indian Ocean and its littorals was a result of these shared endeavors. That Op Rahat, Op Maitri, or Op Sankat Mochan entered the foreign ministry lexicon so readily, so naturally, spoke volumes of the distance that we traveled during this period. The sense of coordination and shared responsibility that many of these activities reflected grew rapidly as we dealt with different facets of national security. Whether it was the strike across the LOC in the aftermath of the Uri terrorist attack, or the neutralizing of IIGs along the Myanmar border, the foreign ministry was very much an integral element of a larger effort. At times, this could be even broader, such as the effort to accelerate the building of a contemporary border infrastructure. And here too, I saw firsthand Manohar Parikarji's willingness to challenge orthodoxies as he set about determinedly reforming the Border Roads Organization. Policy and practicality, of course, go hand in hand, and the intensification of strategic partnership only takes place when that happens. Parikarji made a notable contribution to the development of three of them, with France, with the United States, and with Russia. The personal equations he developed contributed in no small way to that objective. Overall, in an era where foreign policy has got more securitized and defense policy has got more strategized, the integrated outlook that he promoted has certainly introduced changes in our working style. So as we look ahead, it is natural to ask ourselves how he would have approached the issues with which we are grappling today. Now, the interplay between diplomacy and defense policy has been visible actually from the early days of our independence. Having served in many embassies where this was happening, I can personally testify to the difference that adept diplomacy can make to defense preparedness. Given our industrial limitations, we have long been dependent on import of equipment and technology. While it is now our endeavor to strengthen defense industry at home, it will nevertheless remain a major consideration in the foreseeable future. Now, it must be credited to Indian diplomacy that over the years, they have allowed the nation to source its defense needs from many suppliers, ranging from Russia and the United States to France, UK, Germany, Israel. We may take this as granted today in a world where commercial interests are paramount. But do remember that it happened through an era where actually political considerations were much more dominant. Indeed, much of our foreign policy energies were focused on developing this access, and our success in doing so should not actually diminish this achievement. Even more challenging was the task of overcoming the hurdles of technology denial that became increasingly problematic after 1974. While they targeted our nuclear and space capabilities, their impact on our defense requirements was also very significant. It is no accident that the resumption of India-US defense trade took place in parallel to the evolution of the India-US nuclear deal. Since then, India's membership of various export control regimes has enhanced the level of comfort vis-à-vis its defense partners. In recent years, the prospect of India participating in global defense supply chains has come closer to reality. Indeed, given the importance of contract designing and engineering, the value of Indian talent has also steadily grown for an international defense industry, focused particularly now on resilience and reliability. The doors that diplomacy has opened could well become India's windows to the world of global technology. As our capacities in the defense domain increase in tandem with an expanding footprint, these considerations will also be relevant when it comes to our own defense exports. Utilizing diplomacy to achieve military objectives extends, of course, beyond issues of sourcing supplies and accessing technology. Today, our maritime domain awareness has been developed through partnerships with other nations. A combination of coastal radar surveillance systems, white shipping agreements, hydrographic cooperation, and the provision of equipment and training has given the Sagar Doctrine a very strong foundation. If the International Fusion Center at Gurgaon has emerged as the region's hub for maritime security, it is in no small measure due to the larger relationships that India has developed with the participating countries. A similar logic drives the range of military exercises that all three Indian services undertake today with their foreign counterparts, bilaterally or plurilaterally. They too parallel the strategic convergences that have been developed through the use of multiple instruments and policies. These endeavors all contribute to greater regional and global stability and security, a goal as much for defense policy as it is of foreign policy. But having brought that out, let me also recognize that it works the other way around as well. The military can be an extremely effective platform to advance diplomatic goals, even in situations that are not conflict related. In fact, in the last 6 years, few activities have done more than HADR operations to enhance India's stature and credibility in the region. If we have developed a deserved reputation as a first responder, it is because we have done exactly that. In Yemen and Nepal in 2015, in Fiji in 2016, in Sri Lanka in 2016 and 17, Bangladesh and Myanmar in 2017, Indonesia in 2018, Mozambique in 2018 and 19, and most recently in Madagascar in 2020. These have been supplemented by initiatives to render medical assistance and provide essential supplies in our immediate and extended neighborhood, including during the COVID period. In fact, even when it came to directly addressing COVID health challenges, it was our military health teams that were dispatched to Kuwait, to Maldives, to Mauritius, and to Comoros. Beyond all that, of course, our the peacekeeping operations that we have conducted under the UN flag virtually since independence. Our record of 51 out of 71 UN deployments involving more than 2 lakh military personnel, often in very difficult circumstances, is not only widely appreciated, but has actually contributed, it has strengthened our credentials for the permanent membership of the UN Security Council. If the military training and support teams we have extended abroad have developed goodwill of partners, the policy dialogues and the staff talks have strengthened the sense of convergence as well. Now, however laudable better coordination and stronger partnerships may be, and I have spoken about them at some length, they are still inadequate for the world that we now live in. The complexity of challenges that we face in our respective domains is as important to recognize as the mounting stakes that we have in ensuring better outcomes. This is not just an issue for foreign defense, or I would say even national security policy, or even for governments. In fact, the quest for greater integration to realize better value is as applicable, to the business world, to even in our daily lives, as it is to public policy. In the MEA, this has been a major focus of the changes that we have promoted and driven in the last 6 years. The objective is not only tighter in-house coordination, but also a conscious effort to work more closely with other ministries. I spoke of defense, but others as well, and leverage capabilities and talents even beyond the government. We have inducted officers from other services into MEA, established interdepartmental centers, utilized consultants and specialists, and partnered think tanks on high-profile dialogues. We see diplomacy today as much more than just negotiations between trained diplomats. It is as much about creating perceptions and shaping the public discourse. We are also undertaking an ambitious set of development programs abroad. And again, the Paul Mill aspect of our activities has been steadily increasing, indeed as the Millpol ones. And as a field-led model of diplomacy, utilizing our presence abroad as a bridgehead for bringing in additional activities. That is really what is today our well-established SOP. Now, defense has no doubt its own variant of change, and the creation of the CDS was a notable landmark in that process. But models and examples for such endeavors, they are naturally derived from the experiences of those who have undertaken the journey before us. But as our own record in MEA affirms, we have to customize our reform planning to our particular needs and constraints. General Shekatkar, of course, knows very much more about this than most of us, but I'm sure he would agree that as India undertakes the next generation of reforms and embraces greater Atmanirbharta, the military cannot be left behind. It must do its own introspection and prepare to meet effectively the new sets of challenges that we can all see are coming our way. The importance of stronger integration in matters of national security can, of course, never be overstated. If there was actually a big lesson from the 9/11 experience, it was that policy implementation was really undermined by siloed thinking and by lack of coordination. In fact, this applies in equal measure even to policy formulation. Most nations, as they move up the global ladder, consequently tend to focus a lot on these aspects because that is for them one way of maximizing their comprehensive national power. We have seen this earlier with the United States and Russia. Today, it is very much in evidence where China is concerned. Call it coordination, sharing, integration, jointness, or in some cases even fusion. That spectrum of coming together can make a huge difference. But if we are honest, we know that this is also a prescription easier easier made than practiced. For the reality of the world is one of distinct identities, vested interests, and set habits. Not just that, we should also accept that the era of generalists is increasingly behind us. The complexity of national security issues requires serious specialization, and that also means it requires equally serious integration. This is a subject close to my heart, and I have actually spoken about it on earlier occasions as well. So, even at the cost of repetition, I would like to emphasize today the criticality of rapidly improving our current status on this count. Every step forward, while undoubtedly it should be recognized as an achievement, but it should also be treated as the precursor for the next one. We can have exemplary symbolic measures. They may be very important, but in themselves, we must understand they can often be inadequate. There has to be a sustained follow-up to institutionalize integration and an unending effort to foster the accompanying work culture. This is truly a journey where we can never afford to rest on our laurels. In India, we are all aware of the integration milestones in the national security domain, most notably starting with the establishment of the institution of the NSA and its secretariat. The services have also been progressing in their own way and at their own pace towards stronger coordination. While I do recognize that this is not as easy as it sounds, it is nevertheless important that the scale and intensity of challenges mandate that we go beyond halfway house solutions. This can also make a big contribution to the pressing task of optimal resource utilization. To overcome the constraints that all of us are familiar with, leveraging what exists more imaginatively is just as important as eliminating duplication, and both are possible only with better integration. Well, this argument can be made probably from every perspective, and I guess for all domains. Let me share with you how I see it as Foreign Minister. To my mind, adequately securitizing foreign policy is for me the absolute imperative. And the primary focus for that is quite obvious. There are really very few major states that still have unsettled borders to the extent that we do. Of equal relevance is the very, very unique challenge that we face of years of intense terrorism inflicted on us by a neighbor. We also cannot disregard attempts to undermine our national integrity and unity. And over and above these exceptional factors, there are the daily security challenges of long borders and large sea spaces. The thinking and planning of a polity that operates in such an uncertain environment naturally will give primacy, should give primacy to hard security. Even the development of diplomatic skills will be shaped by the nature of this agenda. Where India has strayed from that assumption in an earlier era, we have seen the costs to the nation. I accept that multilateralism and global issues, they undoubtedly have their importance. but they can never come at the cost of core national interest. Now, such realism may sometimes be mistakenly perceived as a defensive mindset. I believe that it is in fact a grounded one. As India expands its global interests and reach, there is an even more compelling case to focus on hard power. A larger responsibility, whether it be in maritime security, HADR, or peacekeeping, it does call for an updated understanding of the global situation. Encouraging our defense and security agencies to develop a better sense of the world is also necessary because of the vulnerabilities which are created by globalization. Whether it is at home or abroad, foreign policy cannot be conducted by any foreign ministry alone anymore. And the bigger you become, the more that comes your way, this logic is even stronger. It is only through the osmosis of continuous interaction that diplomats will understand defense and security better, just as soldiers and intelligence will develop a good understanding of world politics. Now, such a case can, indeed should, be made for other spheres as well. It is certainly our endeavor to make foreign policy more economic, more commercial, technological, digital, more focused on project delivery, more cultural, people-friendly. And each harmonization obviously offers the obvious gains in that particular domain. But they also underline what is today the expansion of the concept of power and its application. The world is more interpenetrative, and national frontiers are increasingly inadequate as a defense. Many activities that had only sectoral significance till now are getting politicized, sometimes, I dare say, even weaponized. Whether it is connectivity or trade, data or debt, tourism or education, all of them are emerging as instruments of influence, sometimes even of coercion. So the bottom line is this: we live in an increasingly integrated world. And unless our thinking matches that, as a nation, we will be selling ourselves short. So let me, in conclusion, thank FINS for the opportunity to share some of these thoughts with all of you today. We are in the midst of big change, and that is best advanced through open and vigorous debate. This was very much the temperament of Manohar Parrikar ji. Our real homage to him would be to make our motherland stronger, more capable, modern, and more secure. Thank you for your attention.
Minister, sir, for many, the subject of correlation between defense policy, foreign policy, national security, such a cliched area and dynamics. I think in the last 30-35 minutes, you made it like a free-flowing river. For me as a student of policy making, if I may pick up some key words or highlights, sorry for if I have missed any. Rebalancing, redistribution of power is going to be the order of the day, for which we require non-dogmatic and self-critical approach. Improving ranking of India will definitely invite different problems, probably distractions. India now matters in the world view, very heartening. We all know, but it is always good to know that for our motherland. Importantly, while narrating Manohar Parrikar's contribution, you mentioned complexity in policy needs constant reviews and audit. Now that requires robust system, and probably when our Parikar sir was a defense minister, he ensured that such a system is in place. Similarly, interministerial coordination, contribution of Manohar Parikar. In fact, here, when you mentioned about evacuation exercise in Yemen and Nepal earthquake, probably are just some examples. There are many more. In all this, I think the highlight and pickup for me as a student was your terminology. Foreign policy securitized and defense policy strategized. Wow, excellent, sir. Probably books can be written on this expression. Thereafter, sir, global defense supply chain coming to a near reality. Military training exercises have generated goodwill gestures for India, especially in the states, littoral states, small nations near South China Sea, which is badly required. And leveraging talents and caliber. And you also mentioned about the outward approach of all the ministries, including MEA. And you, sir, mentioned about increasing role of think tank. Sir, we can assure you on behalf of FINS that we will be available at a call if thought fit to contribute and help in nation building. Sir, you mentioned about realism, and you also mentioned that how many will view it as a defensive mindset, but you were very apt in mentioning about how is it not. In all this, sir, you are equally candid in mentioning some areas of improvements in the form of next generation reform. If all this, if I have to again capsulate in few words, I would say, sir, erudite speech, in-depth understanding of the subject, apt choice of expressions, and message well delivered have been the hallmark of your deliberation and true qualities of a diplomat. Thank you so much, sir, for being here and gracing the occasion of our flagship program, second Manohar Parikar Memorial Lecture. Thank you so much. Now I request our General Secretary, Advocate Pal Desai, to extend vote of thanks and expression of gratitude. Over to you, Desai, sir.
Respected Dr. S. Jaishankar, a career diplomat and now Honorable Minister for External Affairs, Lieutenant General Shekatkar, President, Forum for Integrated National Security, Lieutenant General Vinod Khandare, Military Advisor to National Security Council Secretariat, my colleague Professor Anant Ambedkar, distinguished and eminent personalities who have joined today's lecture organized by FINS in memory of late Shri Manohar Parikar, former Chief Minister of Goa and former Raksha Mantri. This is the second edition of Manohar Parikar Memorial Lecture Series. Late Shri Manohar Parikar, as we know him, a politician, an able administrator, and a strategist. We are fortunate to have with us today Dr. S. Jaishankar to deliver this second memorial lecture on contours of India's foreign policy, relationship between defense and diplomacy to underline the importance of greater integration in policy making. Foreign policy, defense, and diplomacy has a great role to play in terms of relations with other countries in the matters of economy, security, trade and commerce, and also to promote soft power assets. While making policy, the integrated thinking and approach is required. Foreign policy should create more space and options for the country in the international arena. I must acknowledge that Dr. Jaishankar has in a very lucid manner unfolded our country's changing dimensions of defense, diplomacy, and foreign policy. Last 2-3 years, we have been facing challenges which probably no country in the world has ever experienced, especially from our neighbors. These have been handled diplomatically and are being dealt with in the best interest of the nation. It is reflected in the strategy and diplomatic skill pursued by Dr. S. Jaishankar in dealing with the issues impacting the interests of our country. I'm grateful and express gratitude for delivering this lecture. On behalf of Finns, I thank you for sparing time to enlighten the audience on such a complex subject. Thank you, sir. I'm also thankful to Lieutenant General Khandare for introducing Dr. Jaishankar. I must congratulate and thank Dr. Arnab Das, Director, Maritime Research Center, and his team for the technical support extended for today's event. I am grateful and thankful to the audience who have joined this event in large number. With regards to all, Bharat Mata Ki Jai. Thank you, everybody.